AIDS Project Los Angeles has a new executive director. What will this mean for people living with AIDS in Los Angeles? Find out when we meet Jimmy Loyce on AIDS Vision. Welcome to AIDS Vision. I'm your volunteer host, Allison Arngrim, and today we're going to meet James Loyce, who is the new Executive Director of AIDS Project Los Angeles. Welcome to AIDS Vision.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Now, I understand you do go by Jimmy.
That's correct.
Okay. How did you come to get the job of Executive Director of AIDS Project Los Angeles? What were you doing before this, and why did you come here?
I was the Associate Director of the AIDS Office for the Department of Public Health in San Francisco, and largely my responsibility was to take funds from both the city, the state, and the federal government and pass it into the community for AIDS services. And
how did you become involved in AIDS?
I had my first very close friend die from AIDS in 1983. Since then I've had a number of people who are close friends of mine succumb to this disease. I became involved very specifically from a political and a programmatic level in about 1985, when one of the things that we noticed in San Francisco is that African Americans were not being served by the mainstream AIDS service programs. So we did a couple of things. We formed a group called the Black Coalition on AIDS. And I'm a founding member of that group. And then we decided that we begin to join boards of directors of large AIDS organizations in San Francisco so we can influence policy and make sure that they were responsive to the range of cultural needs. I joined the San Francisco AIDS Foundation Board of Directors in 1986 and served till 1989.
Well, that's something that's been a concern of a lot of people about AIDS Project Los Angeles, of is it meeting the needs of different cultural groups? Is that something you think you can address as Executive Director?
Well, first of all, we have to understand that AIDS Project Los Angeles right now serves about 40% of its population is people of color, and that we have a staff that is beginning to match that diversity. I think that philosophically the AIDS Project Los Angeles has always tried to serve the people who walk in the door and serve them in a competent way. We need to continue to examine what that competence level is and make sure through our clients that their needs are being met.
Now, did you seek out a job at AIDS Project Los Angeles? Was that what you had in mind? Did they come to you? How did you wind up here with us?
Actually, I was recruited by the headhunting firm Korn Ferry International for this job. And when they first called me and asked me if I was interested, I told them no, actually.
Now, how come? You turned this down. You ran. You hid. What happened?
I wasn't looking for a job. I was quite happy in San Francisco. I was called again and sent some materials about AIDS Project Los Angeles, and it piqued my interest. The other part of it was that I was very interested in going back into the work that I started 20 years ago, and that was working in community-based organizations. I think the rich thoughts, the innovative programs come from community-based organizations. They don't come from government. They come from the heart and the soul of the folk who are being impacted.
Now, that's different from what I've heard from a lot of people who want to put the focus on government and say, well, the government needs to be doing this, needs to be doing that, and that the burden is being unfairly placed on individuals and on community-based organizations to do things that the government and regular social services should be providing.
I don't disagree with that notion. the fact is that if we're going to get responses to our needs in the HIV/AIDS community, we're going to have to start it. We started responding to it in the early 80s when the government turned a blind eye to it, didn't want to spend a dime, didn't want to hear the words AIDS. It's 1994. We're 11 years into the epidemic, and the government still isn't responding, to my way of thinking, in a way that it should. In finances, in research, in direct services, the government isn't responding. I understand that it isn't responding, and since it isn't, we'll do two things. We'll keep pressure on government to respond to our issues and concerns, and we ourselves, to the best of our ability, will try to provide those services. It's a double-edged sword, which we've lived with for 11 years, and we'll continue to live with it.
And do you see a lot of pressure on you in that situation? Because you talk about the double-edged sword, and it's true, because one of the complaints that is often leveled at AIDS Project Los Angeles for years, it was that they were not political enough, that they didn't address the political issues, that they simply gave people their groceries and addressed their needs, but the larger issues were left hanging. And now there have been complaints that APLA is too involved in things with the media and politics and isn't meeting the needs of its clients. And it's a pendulum that's swung back and forth. How do you walk that line? How do you keep a balance?
I think that when folks raise those kinds of issues, whether it's too political and not client-centered, or it's not political enough and too client-centered, you have to sit down and figure out what it is that the folks are saying to you and how you can partner with and collaborate with those folks so that their issues can be addressed. It doesn't mean that APLA does it specifically. What it may very well mean is that APLA, in partnership and collaboration, helps folks to address those very specific issues, whether it's client-centered or public policy or politically centered.
So this is a continuation of more of this AIDS Project Los Angeles getting involved with other organizations and assisting them?
It is correct. I believe in collaboration and partnership. Our board of directors just finished a retreat a couple of weeks ago, and we've developed a new mission statement and new core values. Part of the core value and part of our mission statement is that we will collaborate and partner with our client base as well as other organizations in Los Angeles, become a part of that continuum, recognizing that we cannot be all things to all people.
Well, things are different from now. When it started, it literally was the only project in town doing anything, and now it's the largest, but there are so many. Now the mission statement's been revised. How is the new mission statement different from the original mission of AIDS Project Los Angeles?
I think that the original mission statement was one long sentence, and it essentially said, we will be all things to all people at all times.
There were a lot of ands.
Yes. And what we're saying now is that to the best of our ability, we will collaborate, partner with our clients and with the community to address this epidemic or pandemic, as I like to refer to it, in Los Angeles County. It does not say we will do all things for all people. We will be the educational group, we will be the food group, we will be the legal group, we will be the public benefits group, we will be all these groups. No, we're not saying we're going to be those things anymore. We're saying we're going to partner, collaborate, and be a part of the continuum of care, with the bottom line always being that we're trying to meet the needs of our clients. That's got to be our bottom line.
No.
It's also got to be our front line, too.
For people who are panicking and saying, oh no, it's just, you're going to close departments, if you decide to farm something out to another group, and that group can't handle the caseload of say, legal services, would you entirely close a department and let another agency do it? If they then went under or weren't able to meet the need, would you reopen? What stopgaps are there to prevent people from not getting that service because it has been farmed out, say?
First of all, I don't believe in the notion of farming out. I don't believe in the notion of dumping services either. That is not what APLA is going to do. What APLA is going to do is that to the extent that we provide specific, let's use legal because that's what you came up with, specific legal services very well, we will continue to provide those services. To the extent that there are other needs and we are aware of a service provider who delivers those to clients, then we will work with them in partnership so that our clients have a continuum of care. They're not stuck here in one place only getting these services when the needs are way over here. So it's partnering and collaborating, doing what we do best and do very well, and looking into the community to see who does those other services that are necessary and making sure that we're connected to them.
So there will be interruption of these services for
There'll be
people.
no interruptions.
And how have you been dealing with the pressure that's put on you with the expectations? I mean, we've been through several executive directors. You're at least the third one I've had just in the time I've been doing this show that I've interviewed. How are you dealing with all of the expectations and assumptions and fantasies and fears that people have about what the new executive director is going to be? What kind of things have people said to you? What position are they putting you in?
Well, it's interesting, and I've said to staff and to others, when I just agreed to take this job, I started getting calls from the cosmos to tell me what I should and shouldn't do at APLA. And my view is that I needed to come to Los Angeles and join the culture of APLA, but join the culture of Los Angeles as well, to sort of get a sense of, from my own point of view, what's happening here and what we might do and do differently. I'm just still in the process of learning the culture of APLA, of learning the culture of Los Angeles. I'm working with other executive directors out there. I'm working with staff at APLA. I've done some intakes, set in on both bilingual and English intakes. I've set in on homeless intakes. I'm going to go to NOLP, Necessities of Life program, and bag groceries and talk with clients. I'm trying to learn the culture, get a real feel from a very personal point of view about what goes on. And then we will have the larger discussions about what kinds of changes we're going to make, if any, what direction we will head in. But the one thing we need to do, and I'll say it again, is collaborate and partner so that we make sure that our clients get the continuum of care. There are a number of expectations, but I don't want to address those expectations. I want to become the person who understands from a very cultural sense what goes on at APLA, from client to staff to other ASOs to the political arena, and you have to do that by being in it. And I haven't been here long enough to give a clear statement to folk about what will or will not be the case in terms of APLA.
So you don't believe in coming in with, okay, this is my vision, this is what I'm going to do, before you've even seen the organization, what's happening. You don't make a decision ahead of time. You come in and say, what's really going on? Let me assess it first.
Yes. And I do have a vision. And the one vision I have right now is that how do we fit the continuum of care? How do I do the kind of analysis that I need to do to determine where we fit in the continuum of care, and how can we make sure that we're a viable and important part of that and are not in isolation?
Your background is in public health. 20 years you've been doing this. How does your experience with AIDS compare to what you've seen happen with other diseases, other health crises?
I think that the difference is that with AIDS, when I first got involved, people's life expectancy from diagnosis was about 6 months. Now we have people who've been diagnosed, who have low T-cell counts, who have not had a whole lot of opportunistic infections, and who are living longer with a better quality of life. Not the best quality of life, but a better quality of life, thanks to other AIDS service organizations in Los Angeles and to APLA. So the chronicity of this disease and managing it from a chronic point of view is very similar to the work that I did in alcohol and drug programs. It's very similar to the work that I did in mental health programs, when you have folks with sort of what I used to call my normal neurotics, who can function in the world but still have issues that get in the way of their doing their day-to-day lives. And we had to support them in terms of their chronicity and give them that viable piece of information or service that allowed them to function fairly well.
Change in addressing it from a terminal situation to a chronic.
Yes.
We're going to go to a public service announcement, and we'll be right back.
Hi, what's your name? Can I buy you a
It's
drink?
very noisy here.
Let's go to my place.
I'd like to relax a bit.
Come on, let's have some fun.
I'd like to get to know you better.
What is it you're afraid of? You don't have to worry about me. I'm clean. Trust me.
Why not? Why not? Why not?
Ready? Aim!
Welcome back. We're talking to Jimmy Loyce. You were talking about how AIDS has evolved and the treatment of it and people's reaction to it is from a terminal crisis situation to more of a chronic managed situation for the people who are living longer. As you said, it's similar to the drug and alcohol work. Have you seen in people's response, in the prejudices, in the ignorance, in the fear involved, similar reactions to other diseases that interfered with care?
They're not similar reactions. AIDS is emotionally charged, it's politically charged. although I think there are similarities to diabetes and to other kinds of chronic and long-term illnesses, the nature of how we contract the virus still has a whole lot of moral judgments associated with it. And because those moral judgments are there, there's a political will not to support the work that we do at APLA and that other organizations do, and there's in some ways not the social will to support, and the social will to support it is important, this pandemic. And so there is that difference. I wish that that weren't true, but the fact is we need to acknowledge that it is true and that we need to keep making statements and providing facts and information so that the moral judgments and the political judgments are different. And it's not to say that there aren't politicians and that there aren't people from the moral community or the church community who aren't acutely aware of the pandemic, but it is to say that there's still a large number of folk out there who do not understand and do not want to understand this pandemic and don't believe that folks who are infected or affected have rights to, and I certainly subscribe to this notion, rights to health care or to public benefits. And we need to work at that.
I've seen how AIDS has been used in a lot of situations as a justification for a person's already existing homophobia. Have you also seen instances where AIDS has been used as justification for existing racism and been used to back that up?
Oh, absolutely. I think that we live in a society that has disposables, from bottles and cans to people. And people who early on in the disease and continue now in disease to be impacted were gay men and bisexual men that were the largest population and still are the largest population who are infected and unaffected by HIV. In a moralistic, and I don't mean that in a positive sense, but a moralistic society, folks who come from the gay and lesbian and bisexual community, according to the majority of society, and I don't know who's doing the counting about this majority, but according to the majority of society, are disposables. There's something not right about those folks, and they use the terms "those folks" to distance ourselves from each other.
The us and them mentality.
Yeah, the us and them mentality, to distance ourselves. Folks, we're in this one together, whether we want to be or not, and we need to figure out a way to cooperate because the pandemic knows no boundaries, and we're experiencing now that it is limitless in who and where it attacks. Although it's still largely in the gay and bisexual community, it has moved outside. Women's numbers are increasing. People of color's numbers are increasing. Racism is prevalent in the society. Homophobia is prevalent in the society. And to say that it isn't and not to address homophobia and racism as we try to address this pandemic is not the wisest thing to do. I mean, we need to acknowledge and begin to address those things and work at them. At the same time, we're working at battling the pandemic.
And on the positive side, I've seen that as a result of AIDS, large groups in the gay and straight community have been forced by necessity to work together, and there's more communication now between the gay and lesbian community and the heterosexual community, but there is still also fear and resistance on both sides. One of the stereotypes of AIDS Project Los Angeles is that it is a gay white affluent men's organization, that this is who's involved in it, this is who their client base used to be, and this is where their thinking is. Now, I have not seen the client base or the volunteers or in recent years the staff really reflect that, but how do you deal with that, and do you face resistance, and how do you link up these two communities so there's not this us and them mentality to fighting AIDS?
Well, I think first of all the two communities are linked now. It's not that I have to do anything. The communities are linked. The way that they're linked and what are the outcomes from those linkages needs to be examined, and we need to figure out how we can work together more effectively and more cooperatively. But we're inherently linked, and we've historically been linked, and I think that when you look at APLA from the board to the staff to the client base, you will see the multicultural nature of the organization, and it has historically been a multicultural organization. Sometimes there are more of one group and less of the other at a given time in the epidemic, but that has to do sometimes with the epidemiological flow of the epidemic more than it has to do with political agenda. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not naive. I do clearly understand that there are tensions between the West Hollywood gay white male community and the people of color community and the straight community. Those tensions can be very healthy in terms of addressing this pandemic, and we need to acknowledge the tensions and begin to work with each other around the tensions, for we all have a common ground. I believe that. I'm not naive in this area. Our common ground, our common agenda is delivering the services to those folks who are affected and infected. That's the bottom line. And if we agree to that, then how we get there is a matter of our ability to perform.
And you've made yourself very accessible to clients and to people who want to talk to you. How do you address a situation a client or anyone else calls APLA and says, I want to talk to you, I want to meet the new executive director, I want to know what you're doing, I feel my needs aren't being addressed. What do you do?
Well, there have been a couple of instances where I've actually had the clients come in and we've talked in my office. There are other instances where I attempt to call clients or write them so that they understand that I hear and do get the information. Now, clearly, my job as executive director does not allow for me to see everyone who would like to see me. Interestingly enough, this is the middle of March. I'm already booked up until the middle of May with appointments for lunches, for dinners, for throughout the day. And so when people call and say, why is it that I can't see him for 2 months? Well, there are almost 10 million people in Los Angeles County, and I think 8 million have asked to see me. I'm not quite sure why, but...
And you're booked for dinner with 6 million.
Yeah. So I try as quickly as I can to respond. If I cannot respond personally, then I make sure that the department that they have some concerns about, the program director in that department or the program manager gets back to that client and CCs me on whatever they've written or sends me a note in terms of what they said when they have contacted that client. Communication is a key both ways. The clients need to be able to communicate with us, but we need to respond to them.
And how do you deal with that? You said there's a hostility, people who are distressed about their situation with AIDS Project Los Angeles. Do you see that it is it that AIDS Project Los Angeles has not succeeded in meeting that person's needs? Do you see it more as a larger problem with AIDS and providing service to people with AIDS in general, that there's just only so much anyone can do? How do you address that?
Well, first of all, there's no one answer to the question. It's both the things you said, and it's something else, and there's another issue here. What we have to do is hear the complaints, hear the criticisms, take those that are legitimate as we do an analysis of the services that we're providing, and try to make some corrections. If in fact they're not legitimate, or if in fact we don't even provide the services we're being criticized for, we need to say we don't do that, but we will in fact connect you with the appropriate service provider. We cannot be all things to all people. We have not been all things to all people. There's an assumption that we are, because, quotes, we're the biggest, and the biggest ought to be doing the most. I think we do one hell of a lot. Now, I think we need to examine whether or not the things that we're doing are the most appropriate for our client base. That's where we are. When people criticize and complain, my response is, one, here's what we're doing now, here's our plan for the future, and here's how we're going to actualize that with the timeline. We are right now in the process of looking at fiscal year 1995-96, which begins July 1. During the course of the year, we will have some programmatic and we will have some service delivery changes. Not on July 1. There's nothing magical about July 1 other than it starts the new fiscal year. But during the course of the year, taking into account some of the issues that have been expressed since I've been here, we're going to address them as effectively as we can.
Now, do you think this is going to be traumatic for some people when they realize that certain things that have been the same for so many years are going to change?
Well, change is always traumatic, particularly if you're the person on the receiving end of the change process. But what we have to do is convince folks that the change is the best for the client base. You are going to get what you need, maybe not at 1313 North Vine, but at one of the other facilities in conjunction with the work that we're doing at 1313 North Vine. Let's look at the center, which provides medical services, pharmacy services. We don't provide either one of those services, yet our client bases are the same. We have many of the same clients. We do provide necessities of life. We do provide a case management system. We need to work together in that collaboration, that partnership that allows the clients to get the food at APLA and the medical services and the pharmacy services at the center. That can happen. Now, we've never provided medical services. Why would we start now? It doesn't make sense with those services that are out there along the continuum.
Now, a lot of this also would stem from financial concerns as well, because APLA is a very expensive organization. It has a very large budget, but it also spends a lot of money. Do you see AIDS Project Los Angeles keeping the same kind of budget? Do you see APLA maintaining that cash flow that they've had for this many years, or do you see a problem economically there?
I think that we're going to see a problem. I don't know that 3 years from now we will still have a $20 million budget. I don't know that to be true. I mean, it's hard to forecast, but I think that what we will be doing is looking at how we fundraise, what we fundraise for, and how, again, and I'll go back to this and people can get tired of hearing it, but it's just simply true, how we can partner and collaborate with the rest of the continuum of care.
Now, when you say fundraise and you say partner and collaborate, immediately you have the organizations who say, are you going to financially partner and collaborate? Are you going to give money or share fundraising events with other organizations?
I think that that's possible. I need to also say that it's interesting to me that people raise the question about whether APLA gives money to other organizations. I'm here to tell you it does, and that historically it has, and that we will build into our budget process a way for us to continue to give money to other organizations, whether that is buying tickets at their events or sponsoring specific activities that they are engaging with as an organization. It's happened historically, it will continue to happen. But we need to figure out a way to announce it publicly when we do it, how we do it, and what we're doing. We also need for the other organizations to bring something to the table too. It's not just APLA saying, okay, we have this, we're bringing it and giving it to you. I think that in a partnership and the collaborations, folks come to the table with whatever they have and we try to share it. If you've got bread and I got peanut butter, we got a sandwich.
Well, I think you're probably going to hear from everyone in Los Angeles that you haven't already heard from. I thank you for watching AIDS Vision. You can get in touch with Jimmy through AIDS Project Los Angeles. But remember, he is booked for the next 2 months. And when is the APLA Dance-a-thon?
April 23rd.
April 23rd. See you there.